So our final speaker for the session is Cameron Veal, and he's going to be telling us about the little lake that could.
Okay. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I feel quite privileged to be, I think, one of the few water utility speakers in the lineup today. And when I was coming up with this name, I think I was possibly suffering from a bit of Thomas the Tank Engine over, like just saturation. And I was thinking, oh, the little lake that could. That's an awesome name for this discussion. I might put it up there. The bad thing is it's the little lake that could produce greater than 2,000 nanograms of MIB. So it's maybe not the little lake that could. And this is the story that myself and Jackie Hansen, SEQ Water, have been working on around Poona Dam, which is a little offtake or little turkey's nest dam in southeast Queensland. Now, where is this amazing lake? Well, it sits up the top here, and it's located in Queensland, and it's quite a small system. It's only 650 meg. It takes water supply from 3 different water sources and mixes it in this nice little turkey's nest dam. And I saw, Nick had some comments earlier today that they produce 350 gigalitres, and I'm like, damn, he got me, because we only do about 305 gigalitres in a year, and sort of 310 up there, as we say. But this system's quite small, the water plant that it supplies. It's about a 25 meg a day system. But unfortunately, because of our grid connections there, we are actually quite reliant on it putting out water most of the time. It's fairly challenging for it not to be running. And it's got a very small catchment. It's that should say 8 kilometres square, not 0.8. It's a very small catchment, but it's taking water from a large number of sources, and it's running into this water treatment plant at the moment that has only conventional systems. It's got manual pack dosing, and it cannot handle anywhere near these sorts of concentrations. So at the moment, the plant's going to be going through quite some significant upgrades to try and not only future-proof us, but also water treatment plant-proof us. But in the interim, we need to look at some quick solutions to how can we keep supplying water from this scheme. And when we look at the levels of MIB in the storage itself, we can see that when we first started looking at it, we thought, okay, we had one bloom event, and it seemed to line up quite nicely with pseudoanabina and a bit of nutrient availability, and we're like, okay, right, it's a free-floating algae problem. No worries, we've got that sorted. Life is never that simple. We then go and wait a little bit longer, and then we get a huge blooming event. So this is our modelled sort of data, and this is all running up to beginning of the year, and it's all seeming pretty good. But then we have this second massive event, and it's not at all related to pseudoanabina. So with some work we've done with the University of Adelaide, we now know that it's probably free-floating cyanobacteria causing some issues, and some benthic, either cyanobacteria or actinobacteria. One of the challenges is that there isn't actually very good gene synthase technology available for 2-MIB. It's been quite well perfected for geosmin, but trying to get that fingerprint on where it's coming from has been a bit tricky. So we have to essentially consider treatment of the entire lake as an option. So, of course, it comes from multiple sources. We can see in this dam here that it actually has a high year-round concentration. It doesn't sort of follow the nice summer blooms that we're kind of used to and expect in our systems, which makes it a bit challenging to look after. So, being a water utility, what are we really good at? Risk assessments. All right, so we're going to do a risk assessment. We're going to look at all the different in-water treatment options for how we might be able to manage this thing on sort of a 3 to 5 year basis. Now, we're not looking at treating all of Wivenhoe. I know during the Millennium Drought there was lots of discussions about putting a pool cover over all of Wivenhoe. Well, no, that's not quite our sort of assessment. We're looking at what treatment options we have for these off-stream storages, 1,000 megalitre sort of maximum area, and whether we can actually do some in-water treatment as part of that multi-barrier approach to get a decent treatment result that a water treatment plant can have a look at. So we looked at different surface exclusion options, chemical treatment options, biological options, and physical ways that we could modify the water environment so that we could get a treatment outcome. Now, clearly, cool name, shade balls. This was an option that we sort of threw up straight away, and we thought, okay, well, this has been trialled in LA. They're about 36 cents a bowl. There's about 96 million bowls in that top option there. And it's like, looks good, but I think it was Phil that talked about the challenge associated with what would the media think. And it's straight away you think if you have a flood, it's like, SEQ Water loses their marbles. So probably not what we were looking for in a treatment option, and also quite expensive too. At 36 US cents a ball, we were going to need quite a few balls to sort of get up there, and it was about an $8 million fix. And of course, as soon as it rains, it'll flood over the top, and we've got some challenges. There's also, it's quite a sensitive receiving environment. We don't own a lot of our catchments, so we have issues not only with people observing things in our dams, so they don't like yellow floating buoys, they definitely don't like yellow paint on any of our structures. So covering it all in shade balls probably wasn't going to go too well on our social risk assessment side. And although from a water quality perspective it didn't look too bad, on the environment side it was quite an extreme risk in our risk assessment process. $8 million, probably not going to happen. So then we thought, okay, well, somebody suggested a pool cover. Maybe we could have a crack at this one. So we looked at some different options around pool covers, whether we put Martian discs out and let them float around. There's some water quality challenges around this, obviously. We're going to have lots of methane production, and then we thought maybe we could put in a bioreactor, but we didn't quite get there. From a water quality perspective, again, not too bad, but environmental sort of side, it wasn't really going to fly. Solar panels. Now, this was something that was quite cool, because obviously from a solar panel efficiency perspective, having them immersed in water, quite a good option. There were some challenges from a water quality perspective around the edge protection here. And one of the other big challenges, of course, the $15 million price tag for a very small storage, and the fact that we're actually not getting coverage over the entire storage. And if our problem was occurring right in the shallows, we still might have spent $15 million, not seen a water quality outcome, although, geez, we'd have some good free power to run that plant. Now, hydrogen peroxide. We sort of thought we should look at some chemical dosing options as well. Now, being a good safety leader, I don't want to put my team through anything that I haven't done before. So about 16 years ago, I did this same experiment in Tasmania, and it came up fine. No problems whatsoever. It was a good option. When we looked at hydrogen peroxide dosing as an option, it has actually been trialled in South Australia for some specific control options as an alternative to copper sulphate. And it's one that if we could get AVPMA approval for, we might actually consider doing in sort of a bubble plume configuration. Cost to dose is not too bad. Dosing equipment, not too bad. But at the moment, one of the big restrictions would be not only the fact that we're dosing a new chemical into the system that would need environmental approvals, but also that the AVPMA hasn't registered it for that application. South Australia, I believe, is running under a research permit for that activity. The good old copper sulphate. Well, if I can't sell hydrogen peroxide to my environmental regulator, I'm certainly not going to get this one across the line. So hence why I got a photo from the States, because we don't have any from Queensland. We were never going to get that one across the line from a sludge management perspective, from an environmental perspective. So that one was pretty much straight out. We did have a look at Phoslock, which is a product that's essentially about 95% bentonite clays and about 5% lanthanum to essentially bind up some of the available nutrients and make them less bioavailable. And this is an option that's been developed here in Australia and could work quite well. But one of the challenges is that currently lanthanum, there's some ADWG, Australian Drinking Water Quality restrictions on its application, and we were a bit concerned about dosing something that would then actually have a regulatory outcome if we overdosed it. So again, we didn't really look at that one too far. Dosing alum. Now, believe it or not, we actually used to return alum sludge to this lovely dam up until about 2012. So we had really good water quality at that point in time. And if you'd seen those graphs, it was like beautiful, beautiful, beautiful until about 2016. So alum dosing was an option, and obviously it's been trialled in New Zealand. It sort of helps to flock out the water and get us a better condition. And it's very, very cheap to dose. So this was an option that could be viable. However, because it had been used as a sludge receptacle, it had a very, very high amount of aluminium already in the surrounding sediments, and it put that lake at risk of actually supplying water over ADWG specifications for that product. So we got rid of that one as well. We did look at ferric chloride, and this is definitely an option. We need around a third of the amount of chemical compared to alum. And there are some advantages too for if you've got this thing going to a sewage network, because you actually get benefits for your distribution retail entities that are taking that sewage and they can use it in their plants. But again, trying to get approval to actually dose these chemicals into a natural lake system rather than into a chemical dose into a water treatment plant seemed to be pretty tricky. But very cheap, $133 a dose. Diatomics, thank you, Simon, for giving me, saving me a couple of slides here. So we did consider Simon's product, but going to Bala's question around, whether we could actually get that preferable cyanobacteria, preferable diatoms, we were very scared from a water treatment plant perspective because we only need a couple of hundred cells of some specific diatoms before we start having massive issues with our filter runtimes, and then actually presents a public health risk around whether we're actually removing the protozoa we care about. And we didn't want to sort of even try and challenge our plant that was already quite challenged with that little bit of extra fun. So unfortunately for our drinking water applications at this time, we just didn't have enough confidence that we could do it without making a public health risk. But it is quite cheap to dose, and it is good, very good in where Simon's sort of been applying it in that wastewater system and in the ornamental ponds. Biological competition. I didn't realise Cylindrospermopsis had changed its name, so I was really quite happy to sort of whack that in the dam and let that go ballistic, because we know it produces a toxin, at least in Queensland, that we could treat. Maybe we could smother out all the taste and odour producers. You beauty. Cane toads, they work once, right? It should be fine. Again, quite cheap for us to go get a whole lot of water and dose it in there, but we could have also created some other public health risks if we'd grown up something special in that dosed water. So again, risk assessment-wise, probably not going to fly. Freshwater mussels, we thought this might work. I mean, zebra mussels must be doing something beneficial somewhere. We thought maybe we could get these guys filtering everything out of the water column. However, because they need quite a flowing environment and this dam's fairly static, probably wasn't also going to work too well for us, but quite cheap. So it got on the list, but not going to progress any further. Then we started getting into some of the, I'm going to call it fringe technology, because when you start doing all this work, you realise that there's so many brilliant scientists out there producing so many great reports, but when it comes to how you actually get these esoteric things, or the transfer a lot of that esoteric science into sort of the practical application, a lot of the literature drops out. So there are ultrasonic systems installed around Australia with some success, but the actual published information that I can get my hands on and go, yes, there was a quantifiable change, it's just really not there, at least for us sitting on the edge between academia and water utilities to access these sorts of technologies. So this is the LG Sonic. This is the Mercedes of ultrasound systems. Quite pricey, got a lot of high-tech stuff working behind it. And essentially it works by disturbing the water, disturbing the buoyancy density of the algae and trying to push them out, or if in very close proximity, actually popping the vesicles. Now, with our taste and odour problem, at the moment it's gone away. It ran for about 9 months, up to 2,500 nanograms, so we couldn't really treat it. And if we want to put this in, we need to put it in about the next 4 weeks, really. We were looking at artificial destrats, whether we could pump air or oxygen into the system. Could we actually put O2 in to actually quench the nutrient sediment demand of the dam itself? So we had a look at that. Big issues around big liquid oxygen storage facilities or compressors on dam interfaces. Whether we put in subsurface mixers, obviously these work quite well, but an issue around noise. Res mixers, essentially doing something similar but a lot quieter, turning the water over. We had a look at those as well, but again, you can see quite high running costs here, or quite high cost to purchase plus running costs. Lining the storage, whether we just dig it all up, put down a lining and then see how that goes, see if we can essentially entrap that risk under the lining. And whether we sort of plant out the edges and see if we can get some natural benefit from that installation. So we came up with our big list of risk outcomes here, and essentially some of these sort of went through. Ooh, so my laser pointing work. Some of them went through. So the solar panels we're actually considering just from a greenhouse gas offsetting component. We are looking at some of these chemical dosing options, and then we're also looking at some of these options down here. So where we went is we couldn't afford a Mercedes, but there was a Datsun 120Y that we could hire for a little while. So the Datsun 120Y here is going to be installed in about the next 4 weeks. And we're going to be looking at that over the next 12 months on a hire arrangement to see if ultrasound does actually do anything for our systems. And then at least we can have a bit of a quantification of it. It seems to be working well in Tasmania where it's been applied. It seems to be working well in New Zealand where it's applied. But no one's willing to, seems to be publish much material on it or really put their sort of hand up and go, yes, it works. So we're actually going to have a crack at doing that. And then that was essentially our really quick fix. And then the slightly longer fix is trying to get some mesocosm experiments set up there where we're going to look at dosing pure O2 to try and get some of that, quench some of that sediment oxygen demand to try and encapsulate it down there. Looking at trying to get some ferric dosing into there if we can get our environmental regulator on board at very low concentrations. And hydrogen peroxide, because I've tried it, it works. So we'll see if we can apply that again. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Cameron. So are there any questions from the audience? We've got one at the back and then one at the front. Please wait for the mic.
Cameron, have you considered bioremediation?
No, not this time around.
Because it would fix that in a matter of a couple of months.
Could you show me those papers, please?
Yep. Yep, I will.
Because, I mean, when we sat down with we sat down not only with our internal crew, but we also had some people flying from the States talking around different options for us. And yeah, these were the ones that were essentially presented to us, but we really need something that can be installed very quickly. I guess one of the challenges in an engineering firm is they really like things to be plugged in, switched on, and they can see they're working. And when we start talking about source protection work and some of these sorts of slower things, it's much harder to get people to agree to big spends without us having to quantifiably show that stuff's there. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but I'm just saying from how you get things through the business case process.
Yep.
For us, it's a little bit easier to buy a thing or loan a thing and put it in than it would be to do a whole lot of work, like a real natural solution that might take a little while to kick in.
Yeah, no, we could kick it in and have a result for you in about 8 weeks.
All right.
Challenge.
As long as it removes 2,000 nanograms of MIB.
Asking for money back there.
Yeah, try before you buy, yep.
Like Tesla.
One of the big challenges is the resonant time. Once that metabolite's generated, I think it's 67 days residence time in that storage, so it takes a long time. Even once the producer's disappeared, or we can't see it in a monitoring program, it still lingers around for ages, which is fun.
Half of a sales pitch here. Now that we're gluing all of our diatoms onto biofilms, and also you need to think about your nutrient uptake of the inputs, then that's where I think something like our system sitting in those inflows into the system is still a viable option because it's away from the intake and keeping those diatom numbers down.
The problem is that system's quite small. I don't know if there's let's see if we can go back here. That's a 300 metre radius that's drawn on that circle there. Mm-hmm. And the catchment's so small, it doesn't actually it's got such a small catchment, it doesn't really generate inflows too much apart from that bottom left corner. Most of it's pumped in from other sources where we don't have any of the risk, we don't have any of the taste and odour. It gets into the mixing pool and then it just goes crazy. And if we're going to have issues with our filter runtimes and filter blockage, it becomes a public health issue from a protozoa management perspective. So the only way we could do it is take the storage offline, run pilot plant trials and demonstrate to people like Greg in the back corner there that we're not going to actually be having impacts on our public health risks around protozoa management, which is way more up there in the health, like in a risk hierarchy compared to aesthetics such as this.
I want to chew your ear some more.
Hi Cameron, enjoyed your talk. You talked about actinobacteria as well as your cyanobacteria at the start, and I know a number of your reservoirs have actinobacteria producing MIB, geosmin. But in your risk assessment, you really focused on handling the cyanobacteria rather than the actinobacteria. So I'm just wondering, some of those mechanisms like shading and things, you might actually exacerbate an actinobacteria issue. I guess I just wondering how you've dealt with the fact that a bacteria is going to be a different challenge to deal with than a cyanobacteria.
And look, dealing with the whole issue around benthic cyanobacteria and benthic producers, it's a real issue for, I think, water utility managers. We're very much focused on monitoring the water. We've got we've got reasonable understanding of what's going on there. And then when it comes to this benthic mat and what it does, it's so challenging. We can't go down there and monitor it. We can't measure it very effectively unless it's a research program. So I think at the moment we're just running a few Hail Mary trials until we can get something sorted. I mean, the pack dosing at this site is poor operators with 25 kilo bags dosing into 1,000 litre bins. And when they're dosing 50 milligrams a litre, they're doing it literally a couple of bags every hour into that system. So it's not sustainable. So we'll try this and we'll try and do a good job of understanding whether it works. If it does, we'll trial it on some of our off-stream storages. If it doesn't, okay, we'll have to look on to the next solution. But yeah, I take your point that we definitely haven't got a one-size-fits-all solution. We're just trying to see what we can do and trying to get a bit of literature and a bit of research and a little bit of applied science behind what we're doing to see if we can consider these in-water treatment options as part of the multi-barrier approach.
All right, thank you very much, Cameron. And I'm afraid that's the end of this session. So could you please join me in thanking all the speakers for some excellent presentations.